U.S., by the early 1970s, the compact market was expanding and American brands were introducing subcompacts, starting with the AMC Gremlin of 1970, which was priced between $1,900 and $2,000, with annual sales over $50,000. It was 161 inches long on a 96-inch wheelbase and 2,600 pounds, initially with a 3.3-liter 199 or 3.8-liter 232 straight six, with 128 or 145 gross horsepower, or roughly 95 and 110 net, for a high 17-second quarter mile and a top speed near 105, with an average of 21 miles per gallon. But by 1972, bigger engines were offered, including a 5-liter 304 V8. Ford's Pinto was introduced in 1971 at $1,900 to $2,100, with first-year sales over $350,000 that continued to climb through the period. It was 163 inches long on a 94-inch wheelbase and 2,000 to 2,300 pounds, initially with a 1.6 or 2-liter 4, producing 75 to 100 horsepower gross, or 54 to 86 horsepower net, for a top speed over 95, a quarter mile under 18 seconds, and an average of 24 miles per gallon. The Plymouth Cricket was actually imported from Hillman and started just over $1,900. It was 162 inches long on a 98-inch wheelbase and weighed 2,000 pounds. Its 1.5-liter inline 4 produced 70 gross horsepower, or 57 net, allowing it to do over 85 miles an hour, the quarter mile in just over 20 seconds, and get an average of 24 miles per gallon. The Dodge Colt was built by Mitsubishi and started around $2,100. It was 163 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase, weighing 2,000 to 2,100 pounds. It tested at 24 miles per gallon using a 1.6-liter with 100 gross horsepower, or 83 net, for a high 17-second quarter mile and a top speed around 100. Chevrolet's Vega arrived in 1971, costing $2,100 to $2,300 and selling $270,000 for the year. 170 inches long on a 97-inch wheelbase and 2,200 to 2,300 pounds, and powered by an aluminum 2.3-liter with 90 to 110 horsepower gross, or 80 to 90 horsepower net. It could go over 105 miles an hour, do a high 17-second quarter mile, and average 22 miles per gallon. Compacts included the new Ford Maverick of 1970, which started at $2,000 and sold $580,000 for the year. Two doors were 179 inches long on a 103-inch wheelbase, while four doors were 194 inches long on a 110-inch wheelbase. Weight was 2,900 to 3,000 pounds. Initially offered with your choice of 2.8-liter 170, 3.3-liter 200, or 4.1-liter 250 straight six, with 105 to 155 gross horsepower, or about 85 to 110 net. Top speed was 105 miles an hour. It could do 17 seconds in the quarter mile, and averaged 18 miles per gallon. Soon, a 5-liter 302 V8 would be added. The AMC Hornet of 1970 cost $2,000 to $2,100, 179 inches long on a 108-inch wheelbase, and 2,700 to 2,800 pounds. First-year sales were over 100,000, with the same sixes as the smaller Gremlin, as well as the 5-liter 304 V8, with 210 gross horsepower, or 150 horsepower net, for a 16-second quarter mile and a top speed near 120, while base models averaged 17 miles per gallon. Soon you could get a bigger 4.2-liter 258 straight six, or a 5.9-liter 360 V8. The Dodge Dart got a facelift for 1970, starting around $2,300, and it sold more than $200,000 for the year. Longish at 196 inches on a 111-inch wheelbase and weighing 3,000 to 3,400 pounds, with either a 3.2-liter 198 or 3.7-liter 225 slant six, with 125 to 145 gross horsepower, or 105 to 110 net, getting about 17 miles per gallon. There was also a 5.2-liter 318 or 5.6-liter 340 V8 with 230 to 275 gross horsepower, or 155 to 240 net, for a quarter mile under 15 seconds and a top speed around 105. The Chevrolet was simply the Nova for 1970 and cost $2,300 to $2,500. It would be its best-selling year at $315,000. It was 189 inches long on a 111-inch wheelbase and weighed 2,900 to 3,200 pounds, with a full range of engines from the 2.5-liter 153 inline-4 to the 5.7-liter 350 V8. Horsepower ranged from 90 to 250 gross, or 80 to 170 net, for a mid-15-second quarter mile and a top speed over 125. The Mercury Comet was introduced in 1971 as Mercury's version of the Ford Maverick, although it was almost 2 inches longer. Prices started between $2,400 and $2,500, with the same engine choices, up to the 5-liter 302, with 210 gross horsepower or 143 horsepower net, making it capable of a 16-second quarter mile and a top speed near 120. Sales were over 80,000 for the year. 1973 was the last year the Plymouth Valiant was smaller than its Dodge Dart counterpart, except the Scamp two-door sedan, which was Dart-sized, while others used a shorter 108-inch wheelbase. Prices were up to $2,400 to $2,800, with the same engines as the Dart, although the 340 was only offered in the Duster Coupe. A 318 Scamp was a mid-16-second car, with a top speed near 115. 375,000 Valiants sold for the year. For 1971, Pontiac got a version of the Nova as the Ventura II, selling nearly 50,000 for the year. Starting at $2,500, it initially came with a 4.1-liter 250 straight-six and a 5-liter 307 V8. Gross horsepower was 145 to 200, and net horsepower 110 to 140, for a low 17-second quarter mile and a top speed near 115. For 1972, the 2 was dropped from the name, and a 5.7-liter 350 V8 was added. Oldsmobile would follow suit in 1973 with the Omega, priced at $2,600 to $2,800. Base engine was the 100 net horsepower 250 Chevy 6, and optional was an Oldsmobile 350 with 180 net horsepower. With quarter-mile times in the high 16s, Oldsmobile sold nearly 60,000 for the year, and Buick would get the similarly priced Apollo at the same time. It used the same base Chevy straight six, or a Buick 350 with 175 horsepower net, for a low 17-second quarter mile, and Buick sold just over 35,000 for the year. In Britain, the Reliant Regal ran until 1973. It was 135 inches long on a 76-inch wheelbase and weighed 1,000 pounds. It used a 700cc inline-4 with 29 horsepower, allowing it to exceed 65 miles an hour and do a quarter mile in under 22 seconds. The Mini would give up its various branding to become simply the Mini, and it got new doors with hidden hinges. It was 120 to 125 inches long on an 80-inch wheelbase, weighing 1,400 to 1,500 pounds. Engines were 850, 1,000, and 1,300 cc, with 34 to 76 horsepower. For a mid-17-second quarter mile, a top speed near 100 miles an hour, and better than 30 miles per gallon. The Vauxhall Viva was new for 1970 and was 163 inches long on a 97-inch wheelbase, weighing 1,800 to 2,300 pounds, with an initial base 1.2-liter, eventually climbing to a 2.3-liter. Horsepower ranged from 59 to 112. The Ford Escort was 159 to 160 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase and 1,800 to 2,000 pounds, offering a 1.1, 1.3, 1.6, or 2-liter, with 50 to 120 gross horsepower, or 43 to 115 net. An RS could do a mid-16-second quarter mile and nearly reach 115 miles an hour, while the 1100 averaged 28 miles per gallon. In France, the Citroën Ami 8 was 157 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase and weighed 1,600 pounds. The 600cc Boxer Twin had 34 gross horsepower, or 32 net. The Renault 4 would continue on, being 144 inches long on a 96-inch wheelbase, and 1,400 to 1,500 pounds, with either an 800 or 900 cc 4 with 30 to 38 horsepower gross, or 27 to 34 horsepower net. Good for 75 miles an hour, the quarter mile in 22 seconds, and 34 miles per gallon. Peugeot's 204 was 157 inches long on a 102-inch wheelbase, weighing 1,900 to 2,100 pounds, with an 1,100 cc gas engine with 59 gross horsepower, or 54 net, or a 1,300 cc diesel with 46 gross horsepower, or 40 net. The gas version's top speed was over 85, the quarter mile took just over 20.5 seconds, and it averaged 26 miles per gallon. The Simca 1100 was 155 inches long on a 99-inch wheelbase and weighed 1,900 to 2,100 pounds, most with a 62 gross horsepower 1100, but the Special used a bigger 1,300 with 77 gross horsepower, or 74 net, for a 19-second quarter mile and speeds over 95 miles an hour, while lesser versions got 26 miles per gallon. In Germany, the Trabant 601 was 140 inches long on an 80-inch wheelbase and 1,400 pounds. The 600cc two-stroke twin produced 23 horsepower net for 100 kilometers per hour, or 62 miles per hour. The NSU Prince 4 ran to 1973. It was 135 inches long on an 80-inch wheelbase, weighing 1,300 pounds, using a 600cc air-cooled twin with 36 gross horsepower, or 30 net. It took just over 22 seconds to do the quarter mile, topping out close to 75 miles an hour. For 1970, Volkswagen's Beetle got improved cooling and the new L package with a much upgraded interior. Still 160 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase and 1,800 to 1,900 pounds, but soon a 2-inch longer Super Beetle was offered, as well as a 1,600cc engine with up to 60 horsepower. Sales for 1970 exceeded 375,000, helping it remain the number one import in the U.S. Audi's F103 continued to 1973. It was 172 inches long on a 98-inch wheelbase and weighed 2,100 to 2,300 pounds. Engines were a 1.5, 1.7, or 1.8 liter, with 65 to 90 gross horsepower, or 54 to 80 net. The Opel Kadett B also continued to 1973, at which point it was 160 to 165 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase and 1,600 to 2,000 pounds, using a 1, 1.1, 1.2, or 1.9 liter, with 50 to 102 horsepower gross, or 47 to 89 horsepower net, for up to 100 miles an hour, a mid-18-second quarter mile, and as much as 28 miles per gallon. BMW dropped the bigger 2-liter engine into the 1602 to create the 2002. It was 167 inches long on a 98-inch wheelbase and 2,100 pounds, initially available in tunes of 114 to 133 horsepower gross, or 99 to 118 horsepower net. It could do a mid-16-second quarter mile and exceed 110 miles an hour, with prices starting under $3,000. In Italy, Fiat's 127 was 142 inches long on an 88-inch wheelbase and weighed 1,600 pounds. The 900cc inline 4 produced approximately 45 net horsepower for a low 20-second quarter mile, a top speed of 85 miles an hour, and 30 miles per gallon. While the Alfa Romeo Alfa Sud was 153 inches long on a 97-inch wheelbase and 1,800 pounds. It used a 1.2-liter Boxer 4 with 72 gross horsepower, or 62 net, reaching 95 miles an hour, doing a high 19-second quarter mile, and averaging 27 miles per gallon. The Czech Skoda 100 was 164 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase and around 1,800 pounds, with a 1-liter producing 47 gross horsepower, or 41 net, or a 1.1-liter with 52 to 75 gross horsepower, or 47 to 69 net. The quarter mile was in the low 19s, and top speed was near 95, and mileage around 25 miles per gallon. The Soviet Union had the ZAZ 968, which was 147 inches long on an 85-inch wheelbase, weighing 1,700 pounds. It had a 1200cc V4 with 40 to 44 horsepower net for about 75 miles per hour. The Moskvich could be had as the 1400cc 408 or the 1500cc 412 with 60 to 79 gross horsepower. It was 161 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase, weighing 2,100 to 2,300 pounds, with a top speed near 90 and a quarter mile just over 20 seconds. In Sweden, the early 70s Saab 9.6 was 164 inches long on a 98-inch wheelbase and 2,000 pounds. It was powered by a 1.5-liter Ford 1500 with 72 gross horsepower, or 64 net, for a 19-second quarter mile, a top speed over 95, and 23 miles per gallon. The early second-generation Holden Torana from Australia was 162 inches long on a 96-inch wheelbase and 1,900 to 2,000 pounds. Offered in 1,200 and 1,400, horsepower was 56 or 80 gross. It did a mid-19-second quarter mile and close to 90 miles an hour. In Japan, the Subaru R2 was 118 inches long on a 76-inch wheelbase and around 1,000 pounds. Its 360cc engine initially had 30 horsepower gross, could do a mid-21-second quarter mile, and almost 75 miles an hour. The Daihatsu Fellow Max was 118 inches long on an 82-inch wheelbase, weighing 1,100 pounds, powered by a 356cc two-stroke twin with 33 to 40 gross horsepower. It took just over 20 seconds to do the quarter mile and could nearly reach 75 miles an hour. Honda's N600 was 122 inches long on a 79-inch wheelbase and 1,300 pounds. The inline twin produced 44 gross or 38 net horsepower. Top speed was 80. It could get through the quarter mile in 21.5 seconds and get 36 miles per gallon. The Mazda Familia gained a 1300 Presto version in 1970 to go along with the 1000, 1200, and R100 rotary. It was 149 inches long on an 89-inch wheelbase and 1,700 pounds. The piston engines produced 58 to 77 horsepower gross, with the rotary having closer to 100. A Presto Coupe did a mid-18-second quarter mile and 95 miles an hour, while getting 25 miles per gallon. The Datsun Sunny was 151 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase, weighing 1,500 pounds. More than 130,000 sold in the U.S. over its model run. Its 1,200cc engine made 67 gross horsepower for almost 95 miles an hour, a low 18-second quarter mile, and 29 miles per gallon. The second-generation Toyota Corolla arrived in 1970, and it could be had for less than $1,800. 155 inches long on a 92-inch wheelbase, it weighed 1,600 to 2,000 pounds. Sales would climb rapidly to nearly 210,000 for the year. The four-cylinder engines were available in 1.2, 1.4, and 1.6 liters, producing 51 to 108 horsepower gross, while exports were limited to 43 to 88 horsepower net, with a 1600 being tested in the U.S. with an 18.5-second quarter mile, a top speed of 95 miles an hour, and an average of 26 miles per gallon. The Isuzu Bellette was a larger 159 inches long and a 93-inch wheelbase and 2,100 pounds, available with either a 1.4 or 1.6-liter 4 and 83 to 118 gross horsepower. A GTR could do a low 17-second quarter mile and top 110 miles an hour. The market was slow to see an impact from the fuel crisis, but that would be coming soon. And as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.